Chapter 4. He heard laughter and voices echoing around him. "Morning," said a student. "Good morning," said another student. A blackboard white with chalk dust. A clock with a slightly warped second hand. Bulletin board post faded in the sunlight. The gentle morning light shining hazily on familiar sights. Yuya was standing in a doorway of a classroom. A student near the window looked at the desk beside him. That had been Yuya's desk since the start of school 6 months earlier. "Isn't someone missing?" the student asked, frowning slightly. The other students around him quizzically cocked their heads to one side. Their eyes surveyed the classroom, and they all slid past Yuya. No one could see him. "You think?" someone asked. "Maybe it's just you," another guessed. There wasn't anything malicious in his classmates' reactions. They were simply confused. "Huh. Maybe... Guess that was weird. Sorry." The boy in the seat next to Yuya scratched his head, frowned, and then quickly moved on. "Did you do the reading?" "Nah, no time. I had practice." "Someone let me look at their notes?" Friends chatted freely. Not a single person noticed that Yuya was not there with them. It wasn't just that he hadn't been forgotten. It seemed as though they hadn't ever known a student named Yuya Kuroki in the first place. The bell rang, and his classmates took their seats one after another. Yuya's vacant seat was the only quiet spot in the bustling morning classroom. He felt no sadness or indignation. He was simply, deeply, powerfully relieved. This was good. It was better this way. This was exactly what he wanted. After all, he'd always... Whoa! A voice loud enough to shake the world around Yuya woke him up. He rubbed sleepy eyes, wondering what it could have been as he looked around at the fireless fireplace, the shredded curtains, and the shabby, battered room illuminated by white sunlight. Right, I'm not at home. The previous evening, he had been suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion after eating the meal he'd miraculously kept Grim from snatching away. With no energy left for cleaning any of the other rooms, he'd not so much as fallen asleep as lost consciousness on the lounge sofa. Before the details of his dream had the chance to sink in, someone was slapping his arms and chasing them away. He looked to one side, and Grim was standing there glaring at him.
"You, up and at him!"
"Morning," Yuya said, looking at Grim with bleary eyes. "What's wrong?"
"Morning."
He froze at the sound of this low voice. It wasn't Grim's, and it definitely wasn't his own. Yuya glanced up to see the ghost that had supposedly chased away the night before floating above him. Gah! He fell off the sofa in his surprise, and a cloud of dust puffed up around him. He coughed and choked while the ghost laughed.
"The head mage told us you're gonna be living here,"
said the ghost.
"So that means you're our new pals. Terrific,"
another chimed in.
"Who are you calling a pal?"
Grim grumbled, glaring at the ghost.
"Why'd you come back anyway? You want some more of what I gave you yesterday?" "No. You young fools are always raring for a fight," one of the ghosts said. "Calm down and listen." Yuya got up and brushed the dust off his clothes as Ghost watched.
"You okay?"
one of them asked. "I'm okay," Yuya said, standing next to Grim, who was on high alert. When the ghost had assaulted Yuya the day before, it had been dark, and he had truly felt like his life might be in danger. He felt none of that fear now as he faced the ghost floating before him. Perhaps it was because of the warm sun shining into the room, or maybe it was due to all the ghosts grinning happily, unlike they had been during the encounter yesterday. He took a moment to really look at them. One was puffed up and soft like a marshmallow, while another was bone-thin, and the third looked like a little snowball. All three were wearing silk hats and cloaks, and floating in the middle of the sunny lounge as if they were frolicking at the beach in summer.
"Sorry about yesterday. We were just playing a little prank. Never dreamed we'd scare you like that,"
said one.
"Yeah, exactly. You were so scared,"
the next added.
"Real nice work on our part,"
chimed in the third.
"I was not freaked out at all,"
Grim snarled as he leapt at them. but they bobbed away to dodge him easily. This infuriated Grim, and the ghosts taunted him one after another, laughing playfully, clearly enjoying their tricks.
Look, we really love the way you two get all worked up,
one ghost said placatingly.
Come on, let's just be friends, okay?
Yuya pressed a hand over Grim's mouth, certain that balls of fire would only make everything worse, and bowed his head to his elders. We'd love that. He refused to let this spiral out of control, not when he had just woken up, though now that he had thought about it. What time is it? The hands on the clock hanging on the wall were pointing at the same time that he had been the previous night, obviously stopped. The ghost immediately began to whirl around in a panic.
You gotta get ready and go to work right now. The headmaid sent a message asking you to clean up the main street today. He also said, please, no big brouhaha.
Yuya quickly made himself presentable and left the decrepit dorm with the ghosts. They were surprisingly full of life in the morning sun as they showed Yuya and Grim the way to the main street. Dust glittered and sparkled inside their semi-transparent bodies, making them seem simultaneously delighted and as mysterious as smoke on a dark stage. They passed a number of buildings until they reached a wide road.
This is Main Street,
one of the ghosts told them.
Everyone takes this road to school. You gotta clean it up real nice with your broom and mops so the new students can enjoy the walk to the first day of classes.
Okay, we're gonna head out on our morning walk,
another said.
You boys get in there and get the job done.
The ghosts faded away like morning dew, leaving only their laughter behind. I can't believe they just showed us the way and disappeared, Yuya murmured, staring at the space where the ghost had been.
Get the job done? Are they for real? Look how long this road is,
Grim said as he pointed, looking supremely annoyed. Cobblestones stretched out before them. The road was wide enough that 3 of Yuya could have lain comfortably side by side. There was a bend about 10 meters from where they stood, and the road kept going beyond that with no end in sight. It would probably take them several hours just to clear away the garbage and fallen leaves with a broom. The sides of the road were lined with large stone statues, and the school sat behind them, 4 on the left, 3 on the right. The stone was smooth and shining. How many years had these statues stood facing one another, polished by some unknown caretaker? They were clearly old and well cared for.
I ran across these guys in the rain yesterday,
Grim remarked.
Kinda surprised me.
Yuya had felt the same way when he had been walking with Crowley the night before. Whatever else, these statues were obviously not modeled after human beings. He passed by them on tender hooks, worried that these monsters might start moving at any second.
Who are they anyway?
Grim stared up at the 3 statues standing on one side of the road.
Check it out. This lady here looks like she's got some real anger management issues.
He tossed a bucket and rag the ghost had given him to one side of the road and mimicked the pose of the statue closest to the school building. Yuya frowned. Ghost aside, they needed to do the job Crowley had given them. He really didn't want to disappoint the head mage on their first day and get thrown off campus. He picked up the bucket and was holding it out to Grim, thinking that they could talk and clean at the same time, when he heard a voice from behind asking, "You don't know the Queen of Hearts?" Huh? Yuya and Grim gasped as they whirled around. A rich orange leaped into their field of view. A boy with vivid terracotta hair was standing before them. He was either the same age or a little older than Yuya, and had a red heart painted over his left eye.
Who are you?
Grim crossed his arms and glared. Sup. Nice to meet ya, the boy said as he gave Grim a snap and a wink. He seemed to be doing this out of habit rather than actual enthusiasm. Name's Ace. Ace Trapola. I'm a first-year student here as of today. Pleased to meet ya.
I'm Grim, a prodigy who's planning on being like the greatest mage who'd ever lived. That there's my far less interesting henchhuman.
I'm Yuya Kuroki. Nice to meet you, Yuya stammered. From what Crowley had told him, the majority of first years starting at Night Raven College were 16 years old, which meant that Ace was likely the same age as Yuya. He let his eyes roam, feeling a bit awkward. Ace looked at him curiously. Yuya. Name's got an odd ring to it. Both the head mage and Grim had said that Yuya's name was hard to pronounce. Maybe Japanese names sounded weird in this world.
You's just fine, though,
Grim told Ace, and Yuya nodded in agreement. Things would be a lot easier if he'd just introduce himself like that from now on.
So then, Ace, you need something from us?
Oh, Ace chuckled. I was just surprised there's anyone who doesn't know the Queen of Hearts is all. Is she that big of a deal, this Queen of Hearts? Yuya asked. Yeah, totally. The corners of Ace's mouth shut up. She was this queen who used to live in a maze of roses way back in the day. She was seriously strict and kind of obsessed with rules. She couldn't stand anything being out of order. Not the procession of the cards that served her, and definitely not the color of the palace roses. He looked up at the statue of the Queen of Hearts with Yuya and Grim. She had a crown on her head and a heart-shaped fan in her right hand. 2 fingers lifted the hem of her gown, and she held her head high, looking pleased with herself. As Grim had noted, the look on her face was haughty and strong-willed. She basically ruled over a kingdom of a real bunch of weirdos, Ace said, but not one of them dared defy her. How come? Yuya asked, and Ace grinned at him, as if he'd been waiting for this question. Because the punishment for breaking the rules was your whole head, he told him with a smirk.
That's seriously messed up,
Grim cried, and Yuya shuddered alongside him. Yeah? Ace replied nonchalantly. I think it's cool. I'm a big fan. I mean, no one's going to follow a queen who's nice all the time, you know?
I guess so.
Grim shifted his gaze to the other 2 statues on the side of the road with the Queen of Hearts. He pointed to one of them.
Okay then, what about that lion with the scar on his eye there? He as famous as this queen?
Notch, Ace said. That there's the King of Beasts, ruler of the vast savannah. Well, I say king, but he wasn't actually born to the throne. He had to earn it with a bunch of elaborate schemes. So the lion with the scar over his left eye was called King of Beasts. He stood proudly with his magnificent mane held high and sharp eyes shining with intelligence. He had clearly been a great ruler. I guess after he became king, he decreed that the hyenas wouldn't be pariahs anymore. He said that they should live among his subjects as equals, Ace explained.
Huh?
Grim frowned.
Why would he do that?
Maybe he could look past status and all that stuff 'cause he hadn't been born royal himself, Ace said. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. When you put it like that, he's kind of rock and roll.
Grim stood a little taller and set a hand on the pedestal of the stone statue in between the Queen of Hearts and the King of Beasts.
So then, who's this old lady with the octopus legs?
Just as Grim noted, the lower half of this statue had the limbs of an octopus in place of human legs. That's the Sea Witch. She lived in an underwater grotto. Ace looked up at the statue with the twisting legs covered in round suckers. She basically devoted her life to making sad merfolk happy. A real compassionate lady. If they were willing to pay the price, she'd help them change how they looked, find love, whatever. He pointed at the piece of paper in her right hand. That thing there's a contract. Her mouth was marked by a beauty spot and stretched into a wide, generous smile that went nicely with this tale of a compassionate heart, doing whatever it took to save merfolk. Although they say the price for all that power was a teensy bit high, Ace continued. But, I mean, you're talking about granting wishes here, so it's only natural you have to pay.
Nice.
Grim gazed up at the statue, a dreamy look on his face.
I want to be a great mage already, too, so I can start raking the dough. And then I'm going to eat my fill of canned tuna every day.
Sounds like a plan, Ace laughed. You've got to dream big, you know. Quite pleased, Grim skipped over to the opposite side of the street.
Oh, do the dude with the big hat.
That's the Sorcerer of the Sands. Ace looked up at the statue of a slim man alongside Grim. He was an advisor to a total dolt of a sultan. One time, there was this guy who pretended to be a prince from some other country to trick the princess, and the one who exposed this swindler was none other than the sorcerer here. The Sorcerer of the Sands held a staff shaped like a snake in his slender fingers, and wore a hat with a feather adorning it, and a long cape flowing down his back. He stood with one hand on his hip, looking thoughtful and majestic. Yuya was impressed. An advisor who had saved the nation from disaster, well, he must have been a wonderful and capable person. This sorcerer of the sands had to have been an excellent judge of character, huh? He said.
Probably.
Ace agreed. Plus, after that, he got this magic lamp that everyone thought was only a legend, and he became the greatest sorcerer in the world. They say he used that power to become a sultan himself.
Yeah, real sorcerers can do pretty much anything they want.
Grim held his head high, as proud as if he were the sultan himself, before pestering Ace to explain the next statue to them.
What about this beauty over here?
She's a queen who was said to be the fairest in all the land, Ace told him. Yuya looked at the statue closest to the main school building. Just as Ace had said, the queen's stone statue was so beautiful it made his heart pound a little faster. Even in statue form, she shone brightly, and Yuya would have been too overwhelmed to even meet her eyes if faced with the actual person. She wore a large crown and held the stem of a melting apple between two fingers. She used her magic mirror to check how her beauty ranked every day, Ace continued. And she'd do whatever it took to make sure she stayed number one. Like, sure, she was naturally beautiful, but she was also always working hard to stay on top. I mean, that's dedication, you know? She must have been incredibly focused, Yuya replied. Seems like a country ruled by a queen like her would be a pretty peaceful place to live. On top of that, Ace said, lowering his voice slightly, not only was this total hottie gorgeous, but she was also a master of making poisons.
Poisons?
Grim gasped, taking a step back from the statue.
Now we're in Scary Town.
Well, poison and medicine are flip sides of the same coin, Ace shrugged. And maybe she learned that stuff so she could make herself even more beautiful. I mean, she'd go that far for her beauty. Gotta respect that hustle.
True. Peeps with that kind of drive are pretty cool.
Grim sounded excited. Ace's stories about these giants of history were clearly inspiring his own already grand ambitions. Yuya was also really enjoying hearing the tales behind the statues. The strange little anecdotes took root in his mind thanks to Ace's storytelling prowess. The way he slipped in jokes and kept the story moving along demonstrated an eloquence beyond his years. Was he really the same age as Yuya? Plus, he was surprisingly good-natured, answering Yuya's and Grim's questions without a hint of ill will or frustration, so Yu found himself warming up to the boy. Perhaps feeling his eyes on him, Ace met Yuya's gaze and grinned. He was so cheerful. There were still 2 statues left unexplained. Grim stopped in front of one of them.
Whoa!
He cried.
This guy's head's on fire. He's freaky just to look at.
Yup, Ace nodded. That's the king of the underworld. His frightening name was well-deserved. The statue was of a man with razor-like teeth who was smiling ferociously as a flame danced up from a long, sharp fingernail. He ruled a kingdom crawling with evil spirits. A real powerful dude. And yeah, he maybe does look kinda scary. Ace glanced up at the statue. But he was a straight-up shooter who worked super hard at a job he never even asked for without ever taking a day off. Cerberus, the Hydra, the Titans, they all took orders from this guy right here. The Titans? Yuya frowned, confused. You don't know him? Ace asked. Cerberus, the Hydra, and the Titans were these monsters back in the day, all huge and super strong. The king of the underworld had to have been something pretty special to have these guys obeying every word, you know?
If he was so amazing, he should have just forced some other guy to do all that other boring work.
Grim sniffed.
I totally would have.
But don't you think he's even cooler for not even doing that? He asked. He went in and got the job done. His respect for the ancient king came through loud and clear, and although Grim still looked dubious, he seemed nonetheless impressed.
Pretty great group, huh?
He said,
doing all that amazing stuff.
He shifted his eyes from statue to statue as he walked along Yuya and Ace. until they reached the last of the stone idols standing in between the beautiful queen and the sorcerer of the sands.
This one with the horns is the last one?
He asked.
Who's this?
That's the Thorn Fairy who lived on a mystical mountain, Ace said. She had 2 large conspicuous horns sprouting out of her head. At her feet was a statue of a wild rose bush covered in thorns. She was noble and elegant and a master of magic and curses, even by the standards of the 7, Ace told them. She commanded storms and covered an entire kingdom in thorns. Even the scale of the Thorn Fairy's magic was seriously bananas. The other 6 had possessed unprecedented magic powers, but the Thorn Fairy was clearly on an entirely different level. Grimm's eyes grew wide in amazement. That's not all, dude, Ace said playfully. Listen to this. She could also turn herself into an enormous dragon. A dragon? Yuya stared in disbelief. You mean like in fairy tales and stuff?
What all monsters yearn to be,
Grimm exclaimed. As Yuya looked up at the statue once more, he could feel the grace and refinement of the Thorn Fairy. She held a long, thin staff with a sphere on one end and was clad in a robe with a high collar. Yuya got the impression that the simplicity of her dress was in fact a display of her immense power. The greatest mages ever to exist, Ace sighed. This academy considers the so-called Great 7 to be so important that they built these statues of them and everything. Text singing their praises was inscribed on each of the pedestals of these 7 statues. The Queen of Hearts, a queen who ruled over a maze of roses and brought rule of law to a chaotic kingdom. Under her strict leadership, no rose was off color, nor was any playing card soldier out of step. The King of Beasts. Through grit and determination, this King of Beasts overcame his lesser claim of succession to rule over a vast savanna. He sought equality for all creatures, even those once banished from the realm. The Sea Witch. A compassionate sea witch who dwelled in a grotto deep beneath the waves. To repent for past misdeeds, she devoted herself to helping troubled souls, guiding even seemingly hopeless romances to a true happy ending. The Sorcerer of the Sands. A wise sorcerer of a desert kingdom who used his keen insight to obtain a magic lamp that granted him great power. He supported his king by regularly offering carefully considered words of advice. The Fairest Queen. The fairest queen of all, and the one who was always diligently striving to better herself. She utilized the powerful magic at her command to tirelessly pursue her ideals. The King of the Underworld. The Lord of the Underworld and guide to the wandering souls of the dead, he carried out his fearsome duties with diligence and care, motivating even the defiant to offer their aid. The Thorn Fairy. A fairy who reigned over a mystical mountain, wielding magical powers that included mastery over storms and thorns. Proud and refined, she cherished solitude, even as she commanded her countless minions. The Great 7, Yuya said out loud as a chilly pit opened in his stomach. Grimm's eyes were shining, but Yuya felt more fear than admiration. Now that he thought about it, he was pretty sure one of the nursery school teachers had read him a picture book featuring a fairy tale about a woman talking to a magic mirror. The history of the beautiful queen sounded a bit like that fairy tale. But the feats of these magicians were preposterous. The 7 sorcerers were so powerful they were deemed special even in this world filled with magic. Yuya couldn't begin to imagine how great their power must have been. As he shuddered in something like terror, Graham danced around happily.
Lucky! I'm so jealous. I can't wait for my statue to get built as a tribute to my might.
Pretty cool, huh? Ace said. Then suddenly, his voice changed and was extremely cold and full of malice. Not like some piddling weasel. Huh? Yuya looked over at Ace, who was convulsing with a hand over his mouth. Ace? What's wrong? Ace bursted into laughter, doubled over. I can't hold it back anymore. It's too funny. I can't breathe. His laughter gradually grew louder and wilder. Yuya and Grim stared at him, stunned, until finally he wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes and looked at them. Come on. You're the ones who turned orientation into a fiasco yesterday, right? The charming boy of only moments earlier was nowhere to be found. His bright, friendly smile was more of a sneer, and the flesh of his round cheeks pushed his eyes up, distorting the heart drawn around his eye. You two seriously stand out. Ace held up a finger and pointed the first at Yuya. A total normie, the perfect punchline to a disappointing joke. Every eye in the school focused on him, and he can't even use a drop of magic. He turned to Grim. A monster who wasn't even summoned by the Dark Mirror in the first place, but crashed orientation anyway and got beaten to a pulp by the house warden. He pointedly looked them over from head to toe, before his lips curled into a smile that didn't touch the harsh gleam in his eyes. You're perfect for each other. Every time Ace blinked, he sent sparks of hostility flying through the air, burning the tip of Yuya's nose. The malice spilling from the other boy was so powerful Yuya could practically hear it crackling in the air. Stunned into speechlessness, he staggered backward, and his feet caught on something. Grim. The monster's tail was standing on end, an arrow pointing up to the sky.
Oh, what are...
Grim stammered, seemingly as surprised as Yuya.
You don't gotta be such a jerk, coming at us all of a sudden like this.
It's not all of a sudden, dude, Ace smirked. The look on your face when they picked you up and tossed you out was hilarious. It took everything I had not to burst into laughter in the middle of the ceremony. He dropped his gaze to the broom and bucket in Yuya's hands. What? Neither of you got admitted, and now you're janitors? Pretty sad.
Shut up, you!
Grim shouted, enraged, the pupils of his eyes expanding while Ace roared with laughter.
I'm gonna be a student at the school no matter what!
Nuh-uh. No way. Ace shook his head firmly. Before you try getting into the academy again, maybe you should take another crack at kindergarten. I mean, you're both so clueless you don't even know who the Great Seven are. Not a one of them. Yuya watched the exchange, despairing. If you got one word in against Ace, he would repay the favor tenfold. Yuya couldn't see them winning this or any other argument against the boy with the heart around his eye.
Yarr!
Grim stomped on the ground in frustration and beat at Yuya's thighs.
Hey, you! Don't just stand there! Give this jerk the what for!
Huh? Me? Yuya panicked. Oh, what? Ace deftly arched an eyebrow and leaned in close. If you got something to say, it's a free country, you know. Yuya opened trembling lips. He could tell that Ace was laughing at him, almost daring him to do something. Hilarious. Go ahead and speak then, the cherry-red eyes said with a challenging glint. Yuya's mind went blank, and before he knew it, he was shaking his head. I'm good. Huh? Ace frowned at him. The whole disaster to orientation? Me being a disappointment? Yuya smiled and tried to brush it all off. Honestly, I think it's just like you said, Ace. Seriously? Come on, man. Don't you have any pride? Ace snorted indignantly. Jeez, you're a total bore. The smirk slid off his face as he clasped his hands behind his head, apparently losing interest now that Yuya wasn't reacting as expected. Anyway, I only started talking to you in the first place 'cause I wanted to tease you a bit. But I'm sick of that now. I'll let you get back to picking up trash with your little monster friend. Yuya bobbed his head up and down and turned away from Ace and the cold look on his face. All he wanted to do was to get as far away from this place and this moment as he could. Come on, let's go, he muttered and gave Grim a push. But the monster swatted his hand away, exclaiming,
Yeah, you ain't walking away from me!
He leaped out in front of Ace, stomach puffed up. Ah! Yuya didn't even have the chance to shout out a warning at Ace before flames were shooting from Grim's mouth. Whoa! Ace dodged a ball of fire in the nick of time. The cobblestones at his feet smoked and smoldered. What are you doing?
No one makes fun of Grim, master of fire!
Grim snarled.
I'll show you who's boss here!
Ha! Ace snorted. You want to throw down with me, shorty? Yuya heard whispers and murmured chatter and looked around. The students trickling towards the school were stopping and staring curiously. Huh? Isn't that the monster they caught yesterday? Said a student. What's going on? A fight? Against a first year? Another asked.
Oh, sweet! Get him!
The students began jeering and cheering all around them. Hey, behind the statue there. It's that guy. What's his name? Yuya flushed when the crowd started talking about him. The chattering grew increasingly loud. You can't do this. He tried to get Grim and Ace to cool down. The head mage told us not to cause any trouble.
Shut it!
Grim didn't even look back at him.
This Rudo needs a lesson in manners.
You need to go back to school before you can start teaching anything, a weasel. Ace pulled something out of the pocket of his school uniform. It glittered in the morning sun. At first, Yuya thought it was a wand, but it was way too short. He frowned. Pen? Ace held a capped black pen with a large gem attached at the top. When he brandished it above his head, the red stone began to shine as if in response to its wielder. Yuya felt like he had seen something like this before. When he poked around in his memory, he realized that whatever Riddle had held in his hand the day before had glittered the same way. Grim spewed another ball of fire, but a gust of wind shot forth from the shining stone and knocked the flames off course before they could come anywhere near Ace. The ball of fire flew toward the crowd of onlookers instead, who screamed and laughed in equal parts.
Huh?
Grim was surprised and cast his fire spell 3 more times, but the result was the same each time. A sudden gust would blow up from one side, or from above or below, whichever direction Ace's pen happened to move, and kept the flames from reaching their target. When Ace was left untouched by even a stray spark, Yuya was forced to a single conclusion. Ace could control the wind. The students watching in the crowd around them seemed to take all this in stride, unsurprised by the little show. It seems you could use magic to generate wind as well as fire. Aw, can't hit me with your little fireballs. Ace flashed him with a confident grin and turned his pen toward Grim. Take that! A powerful blast of air slammed into the monster and put out his fire. The force of it knocked him down and sent him tumbling across the cobblestones like a fallen acorn.
How dare you mess with my magic!
Grim pulled himself up off the ground and braced on all fours.
Get ready to eat fire!
That the only trick you know, shorty? Ace taunted and waved his pen. Flames shot forth, air currents jetted past, and Yuya gasped in shock and horror at the new trajectory of Grim's ball of flames. It was heading straight for the statue of the Great Seven. Oh, yikes! Hold up! Ace cried, reaching out a helpless hand. Oh, no! The flame slammed into the Queen of Hearts and engulfed the entire statue in the blink of an eye as the crowd of students watched, stunned. No way, came a shocked murmur from somewhere. This is maybe very bad, Yuya yelped in a panic. Grim leaped up.
It's not my fault! Ace did it! It's his fault for using wind magic!
It's your fault! You're the one with the fire magic, Ace shouted. Triple yikes! If the teachers hear about this... Come now! What's all the commotion here? Yuya turned around at the sound of the familiar voice. Gah! Someone in the crowd cried. It's the head mage! Crap! Run! The students scattered like frightened rabbits. Ace tried to blend in among them and flee, but he was quickly bound by magic alongside Grim, perhaps because the pen in his hand had attracted the censor of the head mage. Crowley waved his staff, the flames vanished, and a charred Queen of Hearts appeared. The tips of her crown crumbled and fell to the ground, ruined by the intense heat of Grim's flames. The head mage staggered back dramatically, the back of one hand pressed to his forehead. It can't be, he moaned. To think that our academy could house a student who would destroy the magnificent statues of the Great Seven. No, see, you've got it all wrong, Ace pleaded as he desperately shook his head, the only part of him that he could move. It was just a teensy little accident, and, it was totally the monster's fault. I will not tolerate excuses, Crowley barked. State your name and your grade. Ace looked anywhere but at the head mage. There's no point in trying to deceive me. Ace sighed in resignation. First year, Class A. Ace Trapula.
Ace Trapula, is it?
Curly turned his eyes to the red and black ribbon tied around Ace's left arm.
From the suit painted on your face and the band around your arm, it seems that you are a member of Hartslebule Dorm, It's almost as if you were hoping to be expelled, getting yourself involved in such a serious incident so soon after starting here. But please have mercy.
Oh, yikes.
Grim winced exaggeratedly.
Not a good look, dude.
My words are also directed at you, Grim,
Crowley thundered, and his tough love magic tightened around the monster.
Ah!
And you. The head mage now turned his stern eyes on Yuya.
You were specifically told to keep him under control, and yet this precious statue met such a terrible fate. How could you do this? I know, sir. Yuya hung his head. I'm sorry. Honestly.
Crowley looked at the contrite group and let out a sigh.
I do hope you have reflected on your actions and feel appropriately remorseful.
I am. Ace and Grim both muttered reluctantly.
Are you truly remorseful?
He asked them, a harsh note in his voice, and this time Yuya joined in.
I am.
The three of them chimed.
Very well.
Crowley nodded, satisfied.
Since I am incredibly benevolent, I shall forgive you this once, after you clean 100 windows as penance.
Huh?
Ace stared at the head mage in surprise. Clean 100 windows? Does that mean me too? Naturally, Crowley replied as he freed them from their magical bonds. I expect you have class to attend now, Trapula. So we will defer this punishment until after school. Once classes are over, I expect the three of you to be good little boys and clean those windows together. Am I understood?
Yes, sir, Ace replied weakly as he stood up and brushed the dirt off his uniform. He twirled a pen in his hand and stared at it before nodding as if something made sense to him now. He stuffed the pen back into his pocket.
Why do I have to?
He grumbled as he headed toward the school. Crowley watched him round the bend on Main Street and disappear from sight before picking Grim up by the scruff of his neck and holding him out to Yuya.
You and Grim are to fulfill your janitorial duties,
he said, then held up a finger.
As per my previous instructions, you will clean the campus now and later wash 100 windows with Ace. Quite the busy day of tidying for you, it seems.
First yesterday and now today? You got it in for us or what?
Grim protested. Yuyu wanted to lodge the same complaint, but he stopped himself with a sigh. He wasn't going to have any extra time to do research in a library after all. Finding the world he came from was going to have to wait a little longer, it seemed. As soon as Crowley was gone, the ghost came flying over.
The head mage really got mad at us, you know,
one told them ruefully.
He said we can't be leaving you all on your own when you only just got here.
Sorry about that, another continued. We never dreamed you'd be this bad at being janitors.
I'm not bad at it,
Grim growled.
I mean, I'm not a janitor.
What are you so angry about? The ghosts asked.
And Grim thrust a fist up in the air.
That mouthy jerk Ace was talking like I'm some kind of failure,
he complained.
Oh, is that it?
The ghosts glanced at each other and chuckled.
Well, I gotta be honest here. It's no wonder. I mean, you're famous. You were the stars of the orientation yesterday and everything, one ghost said.
Ran into some of the school ghosts earlier, and they couldn't stop babbling about ya. Said we got a couple of real-life ones this year, said another. And the paintings kept boasting like I talked to that lost guy first, and I scared him first. We got him beat by a mile, though. We're your roommates.
So, people are talking about that then. Yuya's hand suddenly felt heavy around the broom handle, and his shoulders slumped. Abruptly, Grim slapped his legs, and Yuya jumped.
Ow, what? Why didn't you say anything back at that stupid Ace?
Grim demanded, standing on an upside-down bucket, arms crossed. He was just barely within striking distance of Yuya's head and shoulders, but the eyes glaring up at him were nonetheless fierce.
That stuff he said to you was real awful, but you just grinned like an idiot. Even made fun of me because of you. Should have socked that guy right in the kisser.
Socked? Yuya stared at Grim in disbelief. You can't go around punching people.
What?
Grim held his fist up, ducking and weaving.
Coward!
Now,
the ghost said placatingly.
Didn't the head mage tell you to quit making trouble?
Grim gritted his teeth and stamped his feet. The metal bucket beneath him wobbled and clanged against the ground. The violent sound seemed to give voice to his extreme annoyance and vexation at having lost the argument with Ace. Yuya frowned while the ghost bobbed around him.
But you,
one of them said.
You're never going to make it like that.
Huh? Yuya shifted his gaze from Grim to the ghosts.
All we're saying is nice guys don't got no chance at this school,
another explained.
The head mage didn't tell you?
The third continued.
Night Raven's the top arcane academy in all of Twisted Wonderland. Study all you want, but it don't mean you got even a chance of getting through those gates. You get that letter of acceptance, and then the black carriage rolls up at your door. You have to have magic for that. Real special magic, see?
So, why does that mean I'm never going to make it here? Yuya asked, and the ghost cackled hysterically.
This one's a dim bulb, huh?
The first ghost asked.
The thing is, these kids are a proud bunch. You get me?
The second said.
Trust me, another added. We've been keeping watch over this school for so long, I can't even remember. So we know.
The ghosts were strangely persuasive, and Yuya was reminded of Riddle's behavior the previous day. He'd been almost brimming with pride, and everyone else had taken this in stride, acting as though it were totally normal.
About the only thing any of them believe in is their own power. They don't trust nothing else, and they expect other people are the same. If I were being nice, I'd say they're determined to stand on their own 2 feet. And if I weren't being nice, well, they don't care about anyone. Every once in a blue moon, you see a kid who's not like that. But,
the ghost shrugged,
as a rule of thumb, you better not expect anyone to come digging you out if you get into a jam.
Especially anyone from a different dorm. These kids are pretty territorial, you know. Extra hard on outsiders. Yeah, that. You wouldn't believe the fights we've seen.
Although, we never saw anyone set the Great Seven on fire before.
The ghost laughed as one. Territorial? Fights? Hard on outsiders? Yuya grew pale. So, he paused to pull together his thoughts. You mean magic is something special even here in this world?
Depends on the species.
The ghost looked Yuya over and thought for a minute.
I guess, right. Humans like you, maybe 1 in 10 can use magic, and most of them, they can basically move a cup onto a table or light a fire without a match. Real small stakes. It's rare one who's got enough magic to get into Night Raven College.
Surprised, Yuya looked over at Grim. The monster was still on top of the bucket, head thrown back in an extremely smug fashion. Ever since he'd first encountered Grim the day before, he felt like he was pretty full of himself, and now it all clicked into place. It was probably the magic in Grim's obvious command of it. Monsters and humans no doubt lived different lives, but even still, setting a large mirror chamber ablaze wasn't normal for this world either. Yuya understood on a keenly painful level how powerful students in this place were, given that they had simply stood back and watched the whole thing unfold with amusement.
You do whatever you're told, like a good little boy, and you won't last a week here. Even more so since you can't use magic. These kids will be extra hard on you. You can be sure of that.
The ghost continued.
Push comes to shove, you gotta let 'em have it. Don't worry. Sure, you ain't got magic, but you got fists at least.
Right, yeah!
Grim cheered.
Next time we see that ace, we'll beat up to a pulp.
Nice.
The ghosts grinned at each other.
For real, you gotta.
I can't, Yuya muttered, too quietly for Grim and the ghost to hear in their excitement. I'm not that kind of person. The others looked at him dubiously, perhaps noticing how extremely pale he was.
Hey, you big baby!
Grim snapped.
You can't go giving up before you even get started.
I'm not going to get started, Yuya cried. I told you before, I've never been in a fight. Not once in my whole life.
Not once?
Grim gaped at him.
You've really never, ever fought even once?
Although Grim looked stunned at his confession, Yuya had a harder time wrapping his mind around Grim's perspective of picking fights nonstop, as he had been since the day before. Yuya was bad at confrontation. Just the thought of having words with someone caused his heart to leap up into his throat and made it hard to breathe. The anguish he felt at the idea was closer to disgust than pain. Did anyone actually like fighting? It seemed to him that no one in their right mind could honestly enjoy giving themselves up to danger and the general exhaustion of attack. Ace raring for a fight, Grim ready to take him on at the drop of a hat, the crowd of people cheering them on, it all seemed like a bad joke to Yuya.
No, no, no!
Grim shook his head firmly.
You can't have never fought once. I mean, how are you even still alive?
The ghosts also wore expressions of surprise on their faces.
Come on, you're a teenage boy and all. You must have gotten to a fight with a friend or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Another ghost nodded, a dreamy smile on his face.
Ah, sweet youth. Hot-headed, hot-blooded, picking fights and patching it up, making best friends even bester. All that's decades behind us now, though. Huh.
Oh. Yuya turned his eyes to the ground, feeling awkward. I don't really have any friends. A silence fell over both the ghost and Grim.
You don't have any friends?
One ghost finally asked. Yuya shook his head. I mean, we might end up fighting, so... Getting close to someone made it more likely that he'd clash with someone, in which case, the best thing to do was to keep a reasonable distance from everyone so that he never had a difference of opinion with anyone. He was always hyper-aware of the potential for conflict, which led him to avoid any real connections. This was how intensely afraid he was of quarreling with people, which was why he had never had a true friend, not during high school or at any time before.
Isn't that sort of putting the cart before the horse?
The ghosts looked at each other incredulously.
Unbelievable. But you're so young.
It's not like I've met anyone I want to be friends with anyway, Yuya told him, unfazed. I just don't want to fight. He didn't have any hobbies, and he wasn't particularly passionate about anything. Plus, the root of all conflict was ambition and desire. If he found something he couldn't let go of, he would no doubt be forced to fight someone to protect that thing. I mean, I don't even like to see fighting, he continued. I get so scared, my heart starts pounding like it's going to break right out of my chest. The only reason they'd managed to chase off the ghosts last night was because of Grim. Yuya hadn't been able to do much of anything. Grim had been the one to face them. Yuya was only too aware of that. He'd been lucky. Things had just happened to work out yesterday. The best thing was not to actually get into fights to start with. I'm begging you, Grim, Yuya pleaded. Don't pick any more fights, please. My life gets shorter just watching.
Huh?
Grim raised a dubious eyebrow at him.
Come on, you can't be serious. You're a coward, a weakling.
I'm just regular, Yuya cried. Everybody hates fighting. You're the weird one, Grim. Your fuse is way too short.
Regular? No one's going to respect you talking like that. Shape up, human.
Say what you want, Yuya replied. This is how I am, so... The ghost watched Yuya and Grim with amusement.
But the way you talk with old Grim here, you sound pretty friendly.
He gasped. Now that they mentioned it, it was way easier for him to talk to Grim than other people. Maybe it was the first time he had spoken freely and comfortably with someone outside of his family. Maybe because I don't feel like talking with a person, Yuya said.
True, a ghost nodded. And he don't look like a person neither. So then, the two of yous make a good team, huh?
Another nodded.
We're not a team,
Grim snarled.
He's my henchhuman, a real delicate flower, hide-madeness henchhuman.
He sighed heavily in a way that was at odds with his appearance, as if the weight of the world were on his shoulders. He seemed to have entirely forgotten that he himself was the reason that the head mage was angry with them. A bell rang in the distance, no doubt the signal for the start of class. The ghosts lifted their faces.
Whoopsie. We all got carried away chatting,
one of them said.
Listen,
A word of advice since you're going to be hanging around the academy now. Watch out for them students. Remember, we warned you.
Anyway, better get back to work, another said. We're all supposed to head on over there and clean since they gotta do some emergency repairs on the Queen of Hearts here.
The ghost pointed an apologetic Yuya toward the castle Ace had disappeared into. He passed through it with Crowley the night before, the main building of Night Raven College. He walked down Main Street with Grim and the ghost and climbed the stone steps leading up to the school. There was no hint of sea air he had sniffed the day before. Maybe his nose had gotten used to it. A pleasant breeze blew, making Grim's ears flutter gently. Yuya stared up at the great walls and black roof under the bright sunlight and almost winced on how imposing the building was. The longer he looked at it, the bigger it seemed. According to the ghosts, more than 800 students were enrolled at Night Raven College. This was about the same, or maybe a little more than the number of students at Yuya's own school. He was a little surprised that there were so many since he assumed that such a prestigious academy would only admit an elite few. But apparently, this school had 4 grades, one more than at Yuya's.
It's pretty standard for an arcane academy,
the ghost told him. He'd heard of high schools on a 4-year system overseas in his world. He figured it was something like that and nodded in understanding as he grew short of breath, climbing the long staircase.
Although most of the 4th year's field work,
another ghost noted.
So those guys are hardly ever on campus. Don't even have rooms at the dorms no more. They're all scattered all over the world doing live-in practicums.
The third ghost sighed.
September's always so sad. Every year, all those goodbyes.
Dorm rooms?
Grim asked. He stopped and set his bucket down.
So the other guys live here too?
The ghost nodded.
Each dorm has its own special building. What?
Grim shouted.
I could have been living large instead of in a run-down mess of a building. I hate that ramshackle dorm.
The ghost cheered.
Ramshackle dorm? Oh, I like it. It has real charm.
Yeah. Perfect for our historical home.
The ghost laughed.
Now that we got a cool name, our building's #1.
Rent 0,
one of the ghosts said.
Immediate occupancy, okay. Comes with yard, furniture, and ghosts.
Could do without that last one,
Grim grumbled. Ignoring him, one of the ghosts pointed.
Take a look behind you.
Yuya and Grim both turned around. After climbing all those stairs, they now had an excellent view of the campus.
That there at the end of Main Street? Those are the main gates,
the ghost indicated with the large iron gates visible up ahead.
They're mostly for guests. The students live on campus, so they don't usually use them.
The next ghost pointed much farther to the left.
And you see that building with the round roof? That's the Hall of Mirrors. It's where they keep all the mirrors that lead to the dorms.
Mirrors? Yuya parroted.
Oh dear, the ghost frowned. You never heard of a mirror? Real useful doodads. You can use them to make yourself look nice. And the extra fancy ones will take you to different places.
No, I know what a mirror is, I think. The dark mirror yesterday had been a surprise for Yuya, and it seemed like it wasn't the only mysterious mirror in this world. The ghost continued to point out different places on campus and give them a brief overview of the facilities. The library, the shop, the greenhouse, the large lawn for sports, and another separate stadium for tournaments. Yuya looked out at it all from his position on the sunny hill and desperately tried to cram the information into his brain. Night Raven College was big. He couldn't go getting lost. He hadn't forgotten the ghost's warning about no one coming to his rescue if he ever got into trouble.